The big news today is that we have decided to add 46 more Huawei subsidiaries to the entity list. When something is added to the entity list, it means that the American companies cannot sell to it except if they get a specific license. It's just making sure there are no loopholes in the original. We now have more than 100 subsidiaries on the entity list. Well, here's the entity list purpose. It's under the IEPA legislation, and its purpose is to make sure that we don't endanger U.S. security. President yesterday in his news conferences made clear his concerns about national security and Huawei. So adding more entities makes it more difficult for Huawei to get around the sanction. Well, there is another 90 days for the U.S. telecom companies. Some of the rural companies are dependent on Huawei, so we're giving them a little more time to wean themselves off. But there are no specific licenses being granted for anything.
Okay, so the next deadline we should look at then is November 19th.
Roughly November 19th.
November 19th. And so do you think that U.S. companies are coming up with a plan to fill that business?
Well, everybody's had plenty of notice of it. There have been plenty of discussions with the president. And the president has made clear in his announcements yesterday that he's very concerned about more dealings with Huawei.
Secretary, tell me the risk around Huawei. We've talked about Huawei being a national security risk because it is a state company and Chinese communist company.
Technically, Huawei says that they are a privately owned company, but under Chinese law, even private companies are required to cooperate with the military and with the Chinese intelligence agencies, and they're also required not to disclose that they're doing so. So it's a big problem. But the real problem with the Huawei is in connection with the 5G, because 5G being so much software-driven, very hard to separate core activities from peripheral ones. In 3G and in 4G, you could make a pretty good argument that you could separate. You really can't make that argument with 5G. And as 5G becomes the big activity, it becomes of greater and greater concern. And that's why we've been advising our allies to be very cautious in making their decision. And it's why Congress has passed some legislation constricting American funding of Huawei purchases.